Aloha, everybody. Rick Noel here again. I hope you're having a good time. I certainly am. I'm really enjoying this. I miss seeing all of you at the Blaisdell. I miss seeing you in person, but if we've got to do it this way, this has been an epic adventure for all of us. Just a couple of things. If you haven't been around in the screen on the right-hand side, there's a chat. One of the things that we really like to see is we like to know where you're coming from, whether it's Singapore or Ala Moana or Kaimaki, Big Island, wherever you might be. Just drop us a note in there. It makes us feel good, and we see the breadth of where we're reaching. Thank you so much. What I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to tell you about Bella Kotak. She is an amazing photographer. I've spent some time talking to her. I love her imagery. She's got an eye for detail. She spends an untold amount of time in preparing her images. And one of the things that she's bringing to us all today is a sort of pre-planning on how to go about doing our photography and what we can do to improve our work. So with that, I'd like to bring in Bella. And wherever Bella is, we'd like to see her. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Bella. Hey, Bella, everybody. Welcome. Bella, this is so nice to have you here. Welcome to Hawaii. Unfortunately, this time virtually.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yes.
Hello,
Bella, tell us
everyone.
where
Nice
you are. Bella, tell us where you are.
So I'm currently in Oxford, England, and it is 8 o'clock over here, 8 p.m.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Is it cold for you already? Is it chilly outside?
Actually, it's really nice. It is a bit chilly because we're at the end of autumn. We're at the cusp of winter now. So the leaves have all fallen from the trees, and it's starting to get a bit like misty in the mornings. It's actually very beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bella, when you started your photography career, just give us a little snapshot of what you went through as you made a transition to becoming a photographer.
So I have always been the friend in my friend group that always took photos, and I think I got that from my father. He always had a camera on him capturing us when we were little. I never really considered it as an avenue of a career choice, like not even a little bit. It was only just something that I just did for fun. And I actually studied architecture, and I actually worked as an architect as well, thinking that that was at least something within the artistic realm. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And along the way, I discovered Photoshop, and I thought, well, I'll take some photos that I can Photoshop. And then somehow I fell in love with the art of taking a photo, and marrying that with Photoshop to then create something as something that I thought expressed myself a bit better than architecture ever did.
Nice. Bella, tell us a little bit about your use of the Phase 1 camera, how you go about it, if you have a certain type of lens that you like, and what you like about the Phase 1.
Well, there's two lenses I really like about it, and that is the 80mm lens, which is the equivalent of a 15mm on a full frame camera, because the Phase 1 is a medium format camera. And I really love the 55 as well, which is a 35 equivalent on a full frame camera. And I have to say that since I started using the Phase 1 camera, my work has really sort of leveled up. I can see it, and I can feel it more than anything. And I think it's because it's a bigger, heavier system, and it's not as like quick as, say, like a Sony. Like I feel like I have every shot that I take is a very considered shot, and I find myself looking for a moment and like anticipating something before I hit the shutter. And that sort of slow shooting has really sort of, I think, changed the game for me, because I find myself more present in the moment of creating. Like I find myself inviting the model to emulate something or pose a certain way or just move a certain way, because I'm already thinking ahead of her flow. And then like, And I just love that. I think it's just changed the game of how I capture a picture.
Yeah. Do you find that you shoot tethered, or do you just shoot to a card?
I try and do both. I don't try. I do both. So when I'm in a studio setting or in my living room, I shoot tethered because it's just so much easier to just see the image immediately on the computer. When I'm shooting client work, I shoot tethered. Even if we're on a location, I have somebody set up just to keep an eye on the laptop and the cable to make sure I don't pull and yank things out. And that's tethered. And so the client can immediately see what images are being shot. I actually also stepped it up a little bit lately, which is setting up the Capture Pro, I think it's called, I can't remember, but the program on the iPad. So the client can be somewhere else, a little bit away from the shoot, checking the images as they come, and they can just flag them and like star their favorite images.
Yeah.
But usually when it's just myself and the model on a shoot, on location, and if it's just like the two of us or the three of us with like a small team, I just shoot straight to card. I don't have time to be backing about with the cable.
Well, let's start your workshop, and would you like to be partake into the let's have him in. He's a good man, and we really enjoyed him. Yesterday was fantastic to listen to him. He brought a wealth of information, and it really inspired us to have a better understanding. Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
again?
How are you? Nice to see you again.
Hey, welcome back to Hawaii.
Ah, I know.
Yeah, good. I was just saying you did a great job yesterday. Bella, I'm going to step out. Please, we welcome you to Hawaii, and we look forward to both of you having a chat with us and sharing some knowledge and some inspiration.
Thank you so much,
for having us.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Hello, P. How are you?
Great. This is so interesting. Normally when we have these conversations just between us, now we can share it with the world.
You guys, this is literally like Skype. Pratik and I live on Skype because he's in the US and I'm in the UK. But having Pratik on is something that I wanted to do for my session because you are somebody I work with on a regular basis. And Pratik actually, for those of you who tuned in today and might not necessarily know, he's a retoucher and also photographer now. But it was via retouching that we met. Pratik actually did a seminar or workshop. I attended it and we connected. And this is why I always recommend people to go to workshops. Not because they'll find their husband, but because they'll make a connection.
That's a pretty good deal, don't you say?
It was the best 300 pounds I ever spent. But yes, you will make a connection. And so Pratik and I connected, and he changed the way that I approach shoots, and especially how I edit my shoots. So Pratik, tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll also, friends, while you're on here, we are checking the chat. So please go ahead and leave us questions, because as we go, I will be answering them. So if you have any questions for Pratik while he's here, then definitely drop those questions in the chat box.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, my background is as a professional retoucher. I've been working for the last 10 years or so as a retoucher solely. And in the background, I've always did photography, but just the way the nature of the industry flows, I ended up actually doing a lot more retouching for other photographers. And I was just so fascinated with how people edit their raw files and seeing their raw files and what was possible with it. I ended up going down that venture, and education simultaneously became a part of that as I actually started teaching in different countries, and also how I met Bella too. So it's been a really cool journey, I would say, especially because I was able to, meet great people, collaborate with others, get inspired with different ideas, and then put that into my photography. So again, I have the ethos of always sharing and always sharing your passion, even though you might not know everything. That's okay, because people tend to learn things from the amount of information that you know and the vision that you might have. So I always think that's very interesting. And the way that I always work with Bella is, we collaborate in the sense of a couple of ways. Number one is, of course, editing, the little details of the photographs that tie it all together, but also getting feedback and giving each other feedback on our work. And when Bella asks me how I think of a certain file, I tell her if I like it or not and what things I think could be improved. And then she'll take it on board and decide if she actually would like to do that or not.
I do. I actually do take it on board.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do keep the changes Pratik makes, and sometimes I take them away. But I do learn a lot by seeing my file through your eyes.
Yeah. It's actually quite fascinating because I never know what to expect. And then sometimes what I also do is I give her my work to color grade too, just to see what would happen. And when she's coming from that fantasy kind of background and seeing that on like a fashion picture or a portrait, it's very interesting. And I learn a lot just by collaborating with creatives. So it's given us a continual evolution of our own work just by bouncing back and forth with each other.
So we had a really interesting question earlier from Cole, who asked, how do you get rid of or manage the pre-photo shoot stress? And Pratik and I both shoot. And actually, I would actually go ahead and say that Pratik is actually shooting way more this year than I am, actually. Because in England, we're in lockdown and the restrictions are really tight. So
Yeah.
I've been nervous to shoot. So Pratik, answer this and then I'll go ahead and answer it.
You know, I still get stressed before any retouching job, before any photo shoot. It sounds crazy when you think, oh, if you're doing it professionally, you must feel more confident about it. And the reality is the confidence doesn't come from a fabricated environment that's surrounding you. It's actually coming from the experience that you've had on sets previously. So you kind of almost bank on the fact that because you've done it in the past before, you have the experience to push through. And having that as a springboard to, as a catalyst to propel you through the shoot, I think is really important. And that just comes from experience. So although, getting inspired and everything is great, you have to put it into practice. And right now it adds another level of stress just because of the amount of preparation we have to do, making sure everybody's safe, and making sure they're both parties are comfortable and keeping a safe distance, wearing your masks, things like that. So I think the post-stress or the pre-stress photo shoot issues can be resolved just by practicing a lot before you get into situations where it might be a job, or it might be something that you are banking on to succeed. So shoot. Don't worry about memory. It's cheap. You can fill it up and just have a lot of fun shooting and learning and exploring different lighting situations, environments, and all kinds of things.
Yeah. So in my case, I would say that it's a really good idea to really look into what causes that stress. So for some people, it is anxiety of equipment failure, anxiety of things going wrong, anxiety of maybe the weather and things that are out of your control. So a way that I've learned to manage my pre-photo shoot stress, and I used to really, really suffer from this, especially when I used to shoot weddings. Like weddings really gave me a lot of anxiety, and I can genuinely say I really respect wedding photographers because it's a job. But what really helps me is making lists. So I have a list of all my equipment. I have a list of plan B, plan A, plan B, plan C, because when you're shooting in England, especially when you're shooting outside on location, the weather shifts so fast. We have a sunny morning, a rainy afternoon, and then suddenly a blizzard will come through and you're just like, what is going on? So I have plan A, plan B, plan C, usually set up vaguely in my mind. It doesn't have to be concrete. For example, a shoot that I'm going to talk about today, actually, my favorite images were from plan B because plan A failed. And as I go into the session after our conversation with Pratik, I will talk about that in more detail. So yeah, just make a list and just plan for things going wrong. Actually, I feel like if I expect things to be perfect, then that of course will make my anxiety a lot more than if I plan for things to be wrong.
That's true. And also, I found it useful when you've asked other people for help and not being shy about it, especially when it comes to asking your friends, like, what do you do to prepare before shoots? Or like when you're on location, you always tell people to keep an eye out on situations that might actually benefit you. And I think that's so cool that you're able to set any ego aside and say, you know what, there might be some things that I'm not seeing that because I'm busy, I'd love some help on. And I think that's so important.
Yes. It's so important. But it also depends on the photographer that you are. Like some photographers, they only want to capture what they see, and that's fine. I like to know, I always believe in my little understanding that the more eyes, the better. And some people will just have a different angle because I know once I'm at a shoot, I have my blinkers on. So Pratik and I actually came to blows. We didn't really come to blows, but I told him off. At one of the earliest shoots that he'd ever accompanied me on. And he was filming and I took the photo and I was really happy with the pictures I captured. And then later I saw some of the behind the scene images that Pratik captured. And I was like, oh my God, why did you not tell me about this angle? Like, I love the way everything just flowed. I was on that side and you were here, and you just have to communicate with your team if you ever want to sort of see more angles and just get other people's input. But after that, you were great.
I have
After
never
that, you
had
knew.
a photographer get mad at me for taking BTS.
I was so
I
mad.
was like, what did I do?
The number of pictures that I've lost because I've had my blinkers on, I don't even want to think about them, actually. It's a good thing I have a bad memory.
Yeah, but it is cool though. Now I ask you to do the same thing from my shoots. I'm like, if
Mm-hmm.
you see a very interesting angle that I'm not seeing, let me know, because I want to get it.
Yes, the communication is really important with your team.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pratik, when you are on a shoot with a photographer, what is your role? Like, what have you learned from being a retoucher that you can bring with you on a shoot?
That's a great question. And this also continues the conversation about having creatives on set and the different ways we can utilize each other for our growth. And one way that I think has been fun for me specifically is going there, not only assisting, but also catching, obviously, different angles and stuff, but also trying to see what things I could do to help the smaller details for later. For example, if she's shooting, sometimes she can't pay attention to all the aspects of the environment, but because I'm a little bit more free and hands-on, I can look around the scene and see maybe we need to remove this leaf that's on the floor here, or maybe because the way that she's putting her head against the tree, it's bunching up, so we can flag those things beforehand. So even if you're not a retoucher and you have an assistant that you kind of delegate those tasks to, they're able to keep an eye on what you are doing and what you're missing or not missing, and really tightening up the final photo before it actually is taken. And these things are so critical because you've probably had a personal experience where you go back into Photoshop and you have to correct all these things that you could have easily seen. Even worse is if you have multiple photos with this one thing that's really annoying you, but it takes such a long time to fix. So I think that is probably the most important role. And also brainstorming. I think if you have a big shoot, we brainstorm like a checklist, making sure you have the certain things for maybe even for rental. It might be a really big job, and we kind of go, do we need this specific light? How many watts do we need? Or how many light stands do we need? Do we need sandbags? Do we, what kind of bags do we need? Do you remember before there was a time with Bella where we didn't have duffel bags, so she would use like older boxes to put props in, because it was really convenient. But I remember one of the boxes actually opened up at the bottom, and I said, you know what, we need to get duffel bags for all these extra essentials. So that kind of was something that other people pinpoint to kind of help the process. So I guess the takeaway here is never be afraid to have friends come on board and assist you, and also give them a role if they're interested in helping out. You'll be surprised how many of your friends might even be interested in kind of being a part of it. So I think that's been my biggest role before the retouching process.
Yes, absolutely. So for anybody who hasn't worked with a retoucher, what is the best way that you can reach out to one?
The best way is probably going to be at the moment, probably Instagram or Facebook groups, because there's some groups that allow people to kind of test with retouchers who might be interested in working with photographies. I think it's called like TFP or retouching TFP or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I'm going to go and find that for you guys and post that in the comments. But aside from that, just reaching out to even other photographers who use retouchers and asking for referrals is really good. You can also email me if you're looking for referrals, because although I can't take on new clients, unfortunately, I can also assist in finding you a retoucher who was a couple of my previous colleagues that worked for me. So it's always good to work with people that can give you a personal recommendation too, which is what I have done in the past. Even when working with models or other photographers, I sometimes sometimes ask their colleagues if how their working relationship is, and then proceed accordingly.
Have you ever tested with the photographer? Like, how when as a photographer, we would test with makeup artists and models, and essentially we're testing for free just to see if we work well together.
Yeah.
Have you ever tested with photographers as a retoucher?
That's a very good question, and one that actually doesn't get asked a lot. And the way that I test, the answer is yes. The way that I test is, if there's somebody that I really want to work with, I will, ask if I could work with them, and then kind of test with them if they're interested in allowing me to do so. And more than often I don't, just because what happens as a retoucher is, if you already are doing it full time, you end up getting actually quite a lot of inquiries because of it. So I don't all the time, but when there's certain situations where I go, oh, I really need to work on the file, or I'd love to work with this person, chances are there's a good chance. But again, it comes down to also communication, because when people are very nice and they actually have everything together in terms of what they're looking for, it becomes easier for me as a retoucher to see that they're good to work with, and they know kind of what they're looking for. So those things are very important, especially when it comes to character and communication.
And I'm asking you all the retouching questions because I know that quite a few people in the attending who are watching this right now probably haven't worked with a retoucher. Prior to you, I had never worked with a retoucher, and it was something that I was quite nervous about because I didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
So for anybody who might not know, what is like the going rate when you're working with a retoucher? Like, what is your, not your rate, but like, what is the going rate?
It's $1 million an hour, thanks.
To give us an idea per picture.
Yeah. You just need to do one picture and you're good forever.
Imagine.
I know. I'll work on my marketing for that and wait patiently for that opportunity. But, it's a great question, because I know that you as a photographer also have that question, and many others in the comment section, because it's a natural progression. So the way that I based my rate off of in the beginning, when I kind of was trying to get paid for it, was I was working a full-time job at the time, and I was getting paid, I think, $9 an hour. And this was probably 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, when I was working full-time. And it's crazy to think about, because I actually forgot that that I'm on the 10-year cusp. I have to go back and see what that date was for my anniversary. But but I need to backtrack here for a second. Let me think. I remember, so I was working at a full-time job, and I was getting paid $9 an hour or so. So I thought to myself, if I could make, say, $15 an hour and work part-time after work, that would be enough to kind of, make me happy. Especially because you have to think that an hour of retouching time actually means 3 hours of retouching time, because you're doing the communication, you're doing the backup of the files, you're doing the invoicing, you're doing the revisions and the follow-up. It's actually a lot of work. So I kind of had to figure out if I made, say, $25 to $30 a picture and maybe spent 2 hours on it, at the time it was pretty good. I didn't really factor in all these additional time costs as well at the time, but I actually said I'll use that as my rate. So I kind of averaged about $15 an hour, and I never really told my clients that, oh, I work at $15 an hour. What I would say was, once they gave me the pictures and I asked them what they wanted me to do with them, I gave them a rate based on how long I thought it was going to take. And this is going to be a very personal question, because some people usually take different time periods with the same picture. So once you get the experience of working and seeing how fast you get and really polishing up those skills, you find that you actually get faster as you learn and as you go. And it's quite common, but it does take time. And so some images I would take 20 minutes a picture, some images I would take an hour. If it was a beauty shot with a lot of detail, a lot of contrast, it would take an hour, hour and a half. But if it was a really clean fashion image, maybe outside, soft light, maybe 15 minutes. So I estimated that and gave them a rate. And I stuck with people that kind of kept coming back to me over trying to get new clients, because then I was able to know exactly how long is this client experience going to last per job, and I can get a really good rate out of it. So in the beginning, as I mentioned, $15 an hour doesn't sound like a ton, but if you're only spending 20 minutes on a picture, and I was able to give my client, say, $5 or $7 a picture, then it actually turned out okay. And again, along the way, I ended up learning about all these additional time costs that I then factored into my rate. So instead of $15 a picture, it ended up becoming like 25, and they got a good value out of it because I was able to meet their deadlines. Communication was always on point, and that's how that kind of started. And I ended up getting more business from word of mouth than necessarily marketing myself at a certain point. So that is always good to keep in mind, is that word of mouth and communication actually goes a very long way.
Massively. That was such a great answer. Thank you so much. That's so much value in that.
Yeah,
especially when it comes to this money talk. Like, nobody really talks about rates.
That's true. We are always very scared to talk about the money aspect. And I think we should all be very, I guess, more open about it if people are more comfortable, just for the sake of seeing that as an example.
And if only to protect the rates in our industry from being undercut and undervalued over and over and over.
Yeah, that's true. Do you feel like that as a photographer too, when, you know, because you see other people charging a lot less, does it impact you personally, and how do you kind of feel about that?
Well, actually, I don't know, because I wouldn't know if they have, to be fair. But I know that whenever anybody ever messages me saying that, oh, I've had this offer of a job, do you know how much I should charge for this?
Yep.
Because they've seen that I've done something similar. And I will always be transparent and tell them, I charge this much, or this is how much I think that value is, or just, you know, like, just give a figure. Sorry, I'm so excited.
Getting so passionate.
Yeah, but I just think that if you don't know anything, just reach out to somebody in that field and ask them. And more often than not, a lot of people are actually very happy to help.
Yeah, that's
each
true.
other. So before you go, there's one more question I'm going to ask, and this will lead quite nicely, I think, from what you were talking about, which is, for someone, a question from Lucy, who asked, for someone not as skilled or experienced at retouching, what would you recommend to them to improve their skills?
The first thing is going to be learning your program, because there might be keyboard shortcuts that you can implement. There might be things that you can get used to get faster. I also have a course called the Retouching Series. It's the retouchingseries.com, where you can learn the full gamut of everything you need to get proficient at retouching. And I take it really step by step and slowly for people who are just jumping into Photoshop. And there's a preliminary section called Fundamentals that you can kind of go over with all the tools that you really need and nothing that you really don't. And then it jumps into real life situations that span for hours that you can learn, and it's divided into topics of interest in case you prefer learning about hair or skin, or how do you tackle this weird flyaway situation in a complex background, or, you know, even on backdrops, and then implementing those techniques and skills in order to get a little bit more comfortable. So it's all about practice, it's all about education, and it really is about just time.
Yeah, wonderful, great. And also, don't forget that you have a course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, I'll share the link in the actual comment section as well.
Yeah, so Pratik has a course which I highly recommend, because everything on there is what I practice as well on my post-production end, which we will go through. So Pratik, I'm just going to say thank you so much for joining.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
And yeah, it was really a pleasure to have you for the first part of this workshop. So okay, I'm going to let you go and I'm going to dive right in. So,
all right, enjoy, guys. This is going to be incredible. I've seen it, and you're going to have a great time.
Okay, how do I? Oh, there we go. He's gone. All right, thank you, Pratik. You were wonderful. All right, guys, it's just me. So please keep those questions coming. There was a really great question when I was having a look at all of these from Corey Lee, who asked me, what is your model scouting process like? And I'm going to go ahead and just answer that now before we jump right in to my presentation. And yeah, very quickly, I would say that now I'm a lot more conscious of how I scout my models, and I usually just find everybody on Instagram. And also, because I live in the countryside, it's a little bit difficult to find somebody very close to me. So I kind of make do with what I have around me. And that's sort of been the way that I've worked from the very beginning. I've literally just started shooting with friends first, and then friends of friends, and then I would just look on Model Mayhem and just use people who were around me. Now I'm a lot more conscious about the models that I use, mainly because I have a bigger audience now, and I really want to embrace the diversity in that. So I feel like a lot now I'm very, very conscious about the models I use and people that I work with. I only want to have good energy. But for anybody who ever wants to create and not really have a lot of options, then just use who you have around you. Like your family can make great models, your friends can make great models. So just use what you have and just make it work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation, and I'm going to, there we go. Thank you very much. So for those of you who might not know about me, I've just prepared the first few slides to really show you what my work is about. So in 2009, I think it was, or 2008, around then, so gosh, it's been about 10 years, it's been over 10 years, I started taking photos to improve my Photoshop skill set. And then I went to Bali in 2013, and that was when things really changed for me. I really sort of came into my own, I think. And that was also when I met Pratik and I went to his workshop, and honestly, learning how to retouch properly changed the game for me. So these images that you see now were after that. So this was in 2014 when I started creating photos with just using things that I have around me. So exactly what I said about the model scouting process. This is my friend Camille. She was a customer at my parents' grocery store, and I worked there part-time while I was in college. And I just asked her, I was like, hey, Camille, do you want to model for me? I just want to practice my skill set. And so we would go and shoot in various places around Oxford, which is where I live. And at that time it was summer, so things were blooming, flowers were sort of just spilling over people's garden walls and in the parks. And so I would just stick on a wig on her and go and create some imagery. And then as I continued, the same theme sort of began to flow in my work. I began to reach out to designers, and sort of what began to happen was that the characters that I was capturing began to evolve. So initially, because I didn't have a budget, this was all created for free. The dress you can see here is exactly the same dress in both images, and that was just found at a market, like a thrift market. A lace dress, because I figured lace would look nice on camera because of the texture. And lace and velvet photographed very beautifully. To make it more interesting, I decided to introduce wigs. And because I didn't have any locations, we were just literally shooting outside. So over here, you can see that there's several things that already in my earlier work, I was naturally drawn to, that I just began to keep growing. So A was shooting outside, shooting with natural light, shooting with girls, because I felt the connection, like I'm a girl, I wanted to shoot other girls. I think I was reflecting of where I was in my life with the images that I was creating. So we're starting off very simple, very, nymphish kind of characters. And then as I sort of evolved, I started to slip into more like character-driven work, where I really wanted to transform the girls that I was shooting into creatures from another world, something a bit more magical. I would put crowns on them to make them more powerful. And I think I just project a lot of myself in my work. And then I really started to fall in love with stories. And I don't know, I'm an avid reader. I read a lot of fantasy novels. I read a lot of fiction. And so that sort of strong characters and the cinematography that I see in my head, I kind of wanted to see if I could translate onto an image. And as I work, a lot of the images that you see here were created in about 30 minutes or less. Like genuinely, the actual shooting part is around 30 minutes, and the actual preparation part is about an hour and a half or so, depending, because I'm usually the one doing the hair and the makeup and the styling. Like for this shoot with Lucy and I, it was just me and Lucy. I did her hair, I did her makeup, and we actually shot this in my living room because it was plan B. I wanted to shoot outside. It was raining, so we ended up shooting inside. And lately, especially during COVID, I've come back and I've started to do some self-portraits again, and I shot this with the help of my husband, Pratik, as you saw earlier, and he actually captured this shot. But I set it up and directed him, and we worked on this on a collaborative basis. And so I just have fallen in love with fairy tale photography. Now, when it comes to creating this type of photography, and before I continue even more, please go ahead and leave questions for me in the chat, because I am actually reading the chat as we go, and I really want us to just have a conversation. I don't want this to be like me giving like a TED talk, but I would love to have a conversation with you guys. So I will be slipping from what I want to say and then answering you as we go. Okay, so when it comes to concept creation, I get a lot of questions about how do you, how do you get inspired? Like, what is your inspiration? So I would say that my inspiration is photos, like other people's photos, which I know a lot of people say, oh, don't be inspired by that. But actually, I came across Tim Walker years ago, fell in love with his work, and his approach to photography is so playful that it inspired me to be very playful with my photography. And actually it was Tim Walker's work, and I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with him, and if you're not, I would highly recommend you check him out. It's so whimsical and playful that I'm so happy that I came across him very early on in my creative journey, because seeing somebody have fun at their photo shoots, I think just made me understand that when it comes to my photo shoots, I want to have fun. I don't want to be stressed. I don't want to be riddled with fear. And especially the fear of creation is something that I think cripples a lot of photographers, including myself, when I let it. But as long as I remind myself that, look, even if I fail, it's not a big deal. And as long as I let everybody know that this might fail, then it's not a big deal. And if I cover my bases that way, then I'm allowed to have fun in my photo shoots. And I set up setting to have fun. So for inspiration, I really would look to him, like for other photographers, and how their ethos can influence me in my workflow. I love paintings because I love museums. I love paintings, old artworks. I love the conscious decisions that artists make when they create something. So it's not just old painting, it's even new artists that I find on Instagram. I find them very inspiring. I love anything that's opulent, and I don't know if it's because I'm Indian, so when I grew up, or in my culture, it's very normal to dress up. Like we have saris and all the jewelry and headpieces, and there's lots of like events going on during the year where it's like we celebrate and dress up, and it's all very colorful. And I've always been drawn to being more extra, so I think I bring that into my work as well. And very much a lover of the natural world. I love flowers and nature, but I would probably say that my love of nature has actually grown with my love of photography. Like they've gone hand in hand. And then makeup. So right now, I kind of title those things together, and I'm going to take you through a photo shoot. So what this presentation is going to be is me talking you through a photo shoot that I did last year with a collection of women, and this was a mood board that I sent over. So I had like this postcard actually that I came across. Where is it? It's over here. So this postcard that I came across in the museum that I really liked, and I love the colors. It's a Dutch painting, I believe, and I just really love the colors of this. And my friend Yinzi said that she had a hanfu because she's Chinese and she wanted to create with it. And that immediately took me to this Empresses in the Palace Netflix documentary, Netflix show, and I watched that. And then I found a location nearby, and I was like, okay, Yinzi, I found this location, we're going to pull this together. And then we found a makeup artist, and the whole team came together. Okay. So before I jump into that, I'm just going to have a quick look at my comments. So Caravan asks, do you draw inspiration from fantasy video games? I do not, because I don't play video games. However, I do watch a lot of manga, do read a lot of manga, and I do watch a lot of anime. So that would explain some of the fantasy elements. And especially for this photo shoot, yeah, I would definitely say it's anime inspired. What technique do you use to set up and create such whimsical backdrops? Now, for the backdrops, I would say that depending if it's a natural backdrop, like on location, then I would use a bush or a foliage that had a lot of lovely texture. So whether it's flowers or beautiful leaves or beautiful colors, that's what I would be naturally drawn to. I think texture is really important because it plays a role. And if that backdrop can be connected to the subject, then it just ties it in for a more storytelling image. If you look at any of my work, you'll always see that there's a connection between the subject and the backdrop. Even if whether it's through like flowers that are in the backdrop connected to flowers in my subject, or if there's colors in my subject that's connected to colors in the backdrop. So there'll always be a connection there between them. And I drew that from actually painting. Like when I look at old paintings, they do that a lot. They connect the colors. And I do that too. How do I balance between personal and client work? Katharina asked that. Do you have enough space and capacity to realize personal work in between clients? That is really a great question. I would say that when it comes to me personally, 80% is personal work and 20% is client work. And I have consciously made that happen because I mentioned earlier that I used to shoot weddings for a bit, and I was actually doing 80% client work and 20% personal work. And I found that I was really struggling. I actually began to not enjoy photography, and I slipped away from it for quite a long time. And so when I came back to it, I realized that the switch had to happen. And for that to work, for the 20% that I do client work, I actually charge a lot now. So I make a lot of money from the client work that allows me the freedom to play with my personal work. And then I've also found a way to monetize my personal work via my shop and by educational content, so that the personal work is fun and playful and there's no pressure, but I can still generate an income from it as well. So I have different sources of income that allows me to have a bit more of a better mental space when it comes to working as a photographer, freelancing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue. I'm going to jump back into these questions as we go. So keep them coming. Okay, so communication. So very quickly to cover this topic, when I work with finding a team has always been something that I've struggled with. And I think it's because I don't live in London. Genuinely, I think if you live in a major city, then it's very easy for you to find a team because you're just surrounded by a lot of people, and there's chances are many creators are around you. So living in the countryside, and I'm pretty sure some of you guys who might be tuning in from, other places in the world might be able to relate with me on this. Finding a team is really difficult. But I have noticed that there are ways to make the world a bit smaller. And one is Facebook groups. I always look at Facebook groups and local Facebook groups. There's plenty of creative local Facebook groups around. And I reach out on there with any pitches that I want to work with local creatives. I also put casting calls out on my Instagram. I have a Facebook group as well that people use to find their own teams. And I look on IG. So I source people on IG by looking at hashtags. And then there's also still like Modern Mayhem and other social platforms like that where you can find a team. So for this particular team, it was a combination of people that I found on Instagram and people that also knew other people. So Yinzi and I, so the model that I worked with on this image coming up, she and I are actually good friends now because we met each other on Instagram and we'd shot several times before. She recommended the makeup artist and the designer for the headpiece. And then I recommended the florist that we brought on board. So everybody sort of like knew each other sort of vaguely, and then we just came together. Communication was so important for making this a successful shoot. I cannot stress it enough. I always have either a WhatsApp group going or a Facebook Messenger group going or a Instagram group going. So it depends where everybody is like most connected. So for this shoot, we were actually all connected on Instagram. And I always make sure that everybody shares their ideas first. When it's a collaborative shoot, so there's a difference between a collaborative shoot and I guess a shoot where I'm paying people. So if I have a vision in mind that I really want to bring to life, then I will go ahead and hire people for that. Otherwise, I will reach out for collaboration. And if I work on a collaborative basis, then that means everybody has an input to the final vision. So I might have an idea, but it won't be 100% mine, because other people will be bringing their ideas on board too. And personally, I like to work best that way. I like when people bring their ideas on board and then we sort of work together. So whenever you do that, it's always great to have like a shared Pinterest or a shared place where you can all share images of inspiration and then piece the shoot together. So that's what we were doing in our Instagram group. And then share the progress of the vision, so that by the time it came to shoot day, on the day, I'm very efficient. It's I don't like to wonder about what I'm creating on the day. And I don't want other people to be wondering what their role is on the day either. So on the day, people turn up with the right equipment, ready to just execute. And we've set a time aside for them to execute. So actually for this shoot, I unfortunately did not set time aside for the flowers, the flower umbrella that we made. I thought we would do that in 2 hours, but it actually ended up taking 5. And that was a whole thing. And that leads me on to the next part, which is putting the pieces together. So this is us on the shoot. So Minaz quickly jumped straight into makeup. She knew exactly what she was doing because we had gone through Pinterest boards before, and I had told her exactly what I was looking for, which is a play on the colors of the hanfu that Yinzi was wearing. And she had pitched some ideas for makeup, and we just sort of elaborated them. And even on the day, I am very present with my whole team to make sure that we are creating something together and that is very cohesive. So Minaz was doing hair, makeup, Nettie was doing the hair, and these were the flowers that I'd sourced, and the florist had also brought along with her. I spray painted the Gypsophilia gold because I knew I wanted some level of opulence in the image. Opulence can usually come from a lot of things like jewelry, and we had a headpiece that was very opulent, but I felt like it stood out too much, like alone, and there needed to be something else to connect with the headpiece. So you remember what I said earlier about connections. I'm always looking for connections, whether in color or in texture or in theme. So in this case, because the headpiece was very gold and regal, I wanted something else gold in the image. So the Gypsophilia, which was previously white, I spray painted gold. And I also spray painted the parasol that you see behind gold as well. So that parasol was originally pink, and I just quickly spray painted gold, and there's another little accent that you have in the picture that sort of just starts tying it all together. So these are the flower nails that I made. So the idea for this came from, if you look at any of the Chinese shows, they have these beautiful finger guards. Now, it was very normal in those days to have either 1 or 2 finger guards on the end fingers, because it was just very like a delicate piece of finger jewelry. They weren't like actually supposed to do anything. They were just there as like an ornamental thing. And I kind of liked that idea. And I've used finger guards in my previous images here and there, now and then, because I'm somebody who loves hands. I feel like in a photo, hands can make or break a photo. Genuinely, I honestly believe this, because I'll see a beautiful picture, and then if a hands look like, I'm like, no, you ruined it. Hands are so storytelling. There is a reason why artists genuinely spend time drawing hands and getting hands right. And the same can be applied to photos. So next time that you're ever shooting, keep an eye on hands. So I wanted to bring attention to her hands, and I didn't want to use a finger guard. So I thought, let me just get some really long nails that obviously she's not going to be able to do anything with, and then connect the flowers. So the flowers that we had, those gold flowers that I'd spray painted, the Gypsophilias, I threw them on the nails, and that's another connection that's made again. And then the gold as well. So all of these are just like little connections. In my head, I think, so some people can realize a vision by drawing it out, And if you can draw it out, I think that's wonderful. I think I work in the abstract. So I just know I have different things I like, and then I sort of focus on them and then sort of pull them together. And if it doesn't work, I just take it away. So I work in the abstract. And this is what the finished umbrella looked like. It actually looks a little bit different to what I had envisioned, but it was okay. I knew that I had skills in Photoshop to fix it. And it wasn't as full as I wanted it to be, because again, I under anticipated how long this would have taken. We should have done this the day before, and actually we were doing it on the day, which ate into all of the time that we had. And this is the headpiece that I was talking about earlier. So I had all these different pieces. We had this headpiece, we had this umbrella, we had these nails, and we had the flowers, and we had the makeup. Okay, so my favorite part is when it all sort of comes together. I was really, really thrilled with this. I actually always feel like I've stepped out of my body whenever a character comes to life in front of me. And I feel like I've stepped out of this world and I'm into another world now. And when it comes to shooting, now this is where I think equipment is something that should never ever hold you back from creating a picture. So when I first started taking photos, I would use my mom's point and shoot camera. Like I think I still have it, but it's somewhere. I think it's over there. But it's literally just like a tiny point and shoot camera, and I would Photoshop those images. And then I moved up to a Rebel, like a Canon 450D, like a small entry-level camera. And then I leveled up from that to 5D Mark III. And right now I'm shooting with the Phase 1 system. So I've just sort of like gradually been leveling up, which has been really, really nice. And with it, I think I've been taking my work along the way. However, some things change and some things don't change. And I actually recently went through some of my older work, and I realized that surprisingly, not that much changes. Because more important than equipment is the vision. You can still take beautiful pictures without like a huge camera system or expensive gear or 500 light setups. Like you don't need that. Like for a lot of my work that you saw previously, that was with the Canon 5D Mark III and natural light and a dress from the market and a wig from eBay. And that was it. Like zero budget, created in 30 minutes. So you don't need a big budget, big equipment to create a big vision. Okay, I guess you get what I'm trying to say. But for equipment, I would say that right now I'm using the Phase 1 system. And the reason why I am very much thankful that I had the opportunity to work with Phase 1 in this way is because I know that I want my pictures to be printed big, like really, really big. I want to have a gallery showing with these images. I want them to be available to collectors at a big size. And a lot of my pictures, sometimes they end up getting picked up by brands, and they'll print them big and they'll shoot them up. So with that being said, it makes sense to be using equipment that can handle those files getting bigger and being printed bigger. I'm a very detail-oriented person, and so having the detail in the image so I can zoom in and really tidy things up, while it takes me way too long, I love that level of control, because I love that I've really created the image from scratch almost, right? Like from zoomed in to zoomed out. Although but that's also because I know that in my head, these images are going to be printed big. So that information will be seen. Whereas if I was just creating for, say, Instagram, then I would just simply be using my 5D Mark III, because people are only going to see those pictures on the phone or on the computer. So that's what I use now for taking my photos. And for lighting, I use a ProPhoto. I have two ProPhoto A1 little flashlights. I wouldn't really call them flashlights because they're more powerful than a flashlight, but they're the A1s, and I really, really like them. Like, really like them, especially considering that I shoot alone most of the time, so it's very easy for me to just pick them up, take them with me. Okay, so this was our setup. So we actually were outside for this first look, and I used the ProPhoto on a stand, and I have, I don't know if you can see it, but I duct taped it onto a modifier because, why not? I like the modifier, the diffuse light from the modifier, especially for the feathered lighting from it. And so that's what I was looking for when I was setting that up. And I just set that up at a 45-degree angle from her, and then I was shooting. Duct tape is a lifesaver, Cole. Thank you very much. And Katharina asks, Bella, do you print your images every now and then? Yes, I do. I do. So there's a print over here, and I have a lot of prints behind me, and I actually sell my prints to anybody who DMs me as well, because I haven't figured out how to set up a print shop yet. So yes, I do print my images. And very quickly, Becky asks, do you always shoot in RAW? Yes. Yes. You have to shoot in RAW. Please, if you are somebody who shoots in JPEG, don't shoot in RAW. There's a lot more information. So if you shoot in JPEG, you have flattened your file, and you will really struggle when it comes to color toning or shifting the contrast or the exposure or getting your highlights back or your shadows, because you flattened all that information. You've just done that. So shoot in RAW, because that leaves all that information open, ready to access. I actually expose for skin tone. So some people expose for the highlights and maybe for the shadows as well. But I expose for the skin tone. And shooting with the phase, I'm able to do that quite effectively because it has a lot of dynamic range. Like I can bring back the highlights and I can bring back the shadows. But even when I shoot with my Canon 5D, I always expose for the skin tone. And then the other questions that we have here very quickly. Oh, if you want to see the behind the scenes of this particular photo shoot, I have a video on my YouTube channel. So please go ahead and check that out if you want to see the actual behind the scenes of it. But I'm definitely sharing more information in this talk. Okay, so as we go, I'm just going to go ahead. Now, because I left the shoot to really late, because everything sort of pieced together quite late, especially the umbrella took everyone's time. If I had factored that, if I had sorted that out earlier, we would have had more daylight. However, that would have meant that the next shoot, we wouldn't have relied on Plan B. And actually, I really love the images from Plan B. So even if you fail at a photo shoot, it's a lesson, and it was meant to happen, and maybe, something better will actually come from it. So it's never actually really a fail. Okay, so this is me using the whole team. I've got Minaz here holding the lights in place as I sort of moved it back and forth. Because it was too dark, the phase was actually struggling to focus. So I had Nettie here hold the light from the phone, like the torch from the phone, to just light up Yinzi, and then I would use that to focus. And this is one of the reasons why I really struggled to shoot during the COVID season, because I'm a photographer that really gets into the shot. Like I really struggle to let everyone else do their thing because I notice all the details. So this ties into what Pratik was saying earlier, which is if you can fix something on set in that moment, do it. Don't save it for later to fix in Photoshop. So when I shoot, I am looking at the hair, I'm looking at the makeup, I'm looking at any distractions, like if something has gone a bit too forward, a bit too back, I'm fixing it. I'm looking at the way the dress or the garment that the girl is wearing is sitting on her frame. If there's any wrinkles that I know that I would have to clean up later, if there's any bunches that I know I would have to clean up later, I'm looking at her pose. I'm looking at her face. I'm looking at the angles that work best. I'm looking at where the light is. So if I'm working if I'm using natural light, I take the angle of the natural light and the sun into account to set up the scene. So I might have a vision on location where, I really want to shoot against this arch or this backdrop. But at the time of shooting, especially if you're working with a client and there's not a lot of time allocated, I will move. if the light doesn't work, because the light is another storytelling element. So I'm working with the light, with the pose that I want to capture. So the girl, I'm looking at the expression, the face movement, looking at her body, and I'm always looking at the hands. So if the hands work, then we're getting somewhere. And sometimes all of those pieces are not necessarily in one photo. I would not say sometimes. 95% of the time, all of those pieces are not in the same photo. So I will shoot and I will flow with the model, telling her, just look over here, look over there, because I'm very vocal on a photo shoot when it comes to working with my models. I know a lot of, like, for example, Pratik, I find really, and this is the reason why I always say it to people, you should always jump in and out of your friends' photo shoots if you can, and make friends with other photographers, and it helps them. And then you can learn very quickly how different people work, because you do learn a lot. So from Pratik, I've learned that he actually shoots without much direction. He just lets the model flow, and he's very happy with that. And I'm the absolute opposite. I have to consciously remind myself to pull back and let her flow. But I'm also very vocal, like giving directions, because I know what I'm looking for, and she might not necessarily see what I see. And so it helps her too. And so in this case, you see me over here just positioning Yinzi's hands. So poor Yinzi had this umbrella that was quite heavy, and her hands, I wanted it to look like, so initially they were very grabby because the umbrella is very heavy and she's trying really hard to balance it. And so we had to sort of figure it out where it was sort of resting against her so that her hands could stop being so clenched and start loosening up a bit. And then it was sort of like allowing the umbrella to sort of rest on different parts of her hand so that her fingers were free. Now, when it comes to hand positions in any photo shoot, but especially fairy tale and fantasy photo shoot, I always like my fingers to be a lot freer and looser. And I think I learned this from, especially when I did ballet, like I used to do ballet a lot. The index finger, I always like that to be a little bit away. Maybe I can do it this way. Like have it a little bit away from the rest of the fingers. So usually what happens is if I let the hand go like that, then this line is a really beautiful line. Like it comes from up here across the wrist, and then it sort of like gives this finger a little bit more intention and lets these other fingers like drop a bit softly. So I always tell my girls like, oh, just put a little bit of emphasis on your index finger and relax your other fingers. And then that sort of creates like, even when the index finger bends, then it's a little bit more of a natural soft bend. And that's how I get my hands, like a little hand tip for you guys. So here I'm like consciously going in there, positioning her fingers so that it gets that sort of soft, gentle, delicate feeling that you see in illustrations. I think that's what I'm consciously thinking about. Like I'm looking at not just the moment, but the graphical part of the image. Like how, like, does it look like an illustration? Does it look like something I would see in an anime? I think, I genuinely think that that's what I think about as we go. So this was the final photo, and it was a little bit different. I'm not gonna lie, from what I had envisioned, because we shot this so late. The sun had set and there was no light. So actually the only light that you can see here is from one ProPhoto A1. And I was actually very thrilled with the turnout. I feel like I could definitely see this printed big. I can see this in a magazine. I can see this hanging in a gallery, and that's exactly what I look for when it comes to creating my work. So even though things will go wrong, you don't have to let it. You don't have to let it ever overwhelm you. And I think disappointments happen when you're attached to a particular idea of an expectation. Like disappointments happen when you're attached to an expectation. So I release myself of expectations. I just let it be. So even though it's different to what I had envisioned, I was never really attached to the idea that I had in my head, and so I'm always happy. So I always recommend that people have zero expectations, or if you're going to have any expectations at all, set them really low. For everything in life, then you'll always be happy. All right. So this was a final photo, and the flowers were actually yellow, and I pushed them in Photoshop to blue. And the reason why I did that was because I felt that having too much yellow actually it collided with her skin tone, which I wanted to have a more golden glowy tone. And I just felt like it didn't give the picture like a wow. I actually shared this photo in my Facebook group called Fairytales and Fantasy with Bella Kotak, and I shared the yellow version and the blue version, and I asked people to make a select, like pick their favorite. I personally was drawn to this one, and this is the one that a lot of people picked as well. And I wondered about it, and I think it's because of the play between the red and the blue. And I also went ahead and in the flowers inside the umbrella over here, I hand painted some of those flowers blue as well. So now I have a connection of the blue in her umbrella to the blue of the flowers in the background, and then tied into like the sort of bluey greeny sash that she's got around her as well. So there's a connection like that there. And then the red of her flowers and the red of her hanfu is connected to the leaves and the leaves on the ground as well. Okay. So then we got to plan B, and plan B is shooting inside. So because we ran out of time outside and I didn't get the detail shots, and I felt really bad that everybody had put so much time and effort into setting up this look, and we were on location and we'd run out of lights, and I only had the one light on me. I didn't have 2 or 3. I was like, let's just go inside. And it was freezing cold. We shot this in, I think, December. So it was very cold, and she was going red. So we came back at home into my living room. I set up a blue backdrop, and I already knew in my head that this blue backdrop was going to be taken away. So I used a color that I could easily select away in Photoshop and impose another backdrop in there. And I had the girls pull and push the fabrics and toss them around, and I worked with Yinzi on her hands to really get that delicate look. And these are our final images. Now, for these images, I actually used 2 lights. So I used 2 A1s, and I had the 1 A1 over here on the side on the left, sort of pointing at her a little bit, and then pointing away from her. It was a fill. So the one on the left is a fill, and the one on the right is more direct, like more on her. So that's what you see over here. You can already see that the one on the right has more of an impact on her, and the other one is just as a fill to take the edge off the shadows. And I added the backdrop. So I took away the blue that you can see over here, and I created floral backdrops, which, by the way, I will make available to you in my color store because they are so beautiful, and I feel like more people would love these as well because, yeah, they just add an extra to the photo. And I was so happy with this because it came sort of in a bit of a full circle because this was one of the inspirations. This Dutch painting was about a vase of flowers, was an inspiration. So having the flowers in the picture itself as a backdrop just connected. And then when it came to the color toning, I fed off the photo as well. So the photo has a lot of deep shadows. It has these beautiful coral reds, although it's looking a bit pink in here. But it has beautiful coral reds, lovely soft muted greens, and a warm cast, which is what I really was attracted to, that sort of old look. So that's what I did with the color toning. Now, we shot several images, and I always make sure that when I'm working with a team, I get images for everybody on that team. So I made sure to get images of the headpiece that the that the designer could use. I made sure to get images, close-up images of the makeup that the makeup artist could use, and images of the flowers, flower umbrella that the florist could use. So everybody gets images from our photo shoots that they can use in their own portfolios, and then I get the images from my portfolio that work really beautifully as a set. So that leads us on to post-production. And I'm going to go ahead now and share my screen. But before I do that, I'm just going to go and check your questions. Are you enjoying this so far? Let me know. Okay, so Elizabeth asked a really great question, which is, what do you do when you have a creative block? Well, Elizabeth, I feel like everybody who has any artistic tendencies, whether you're a photographer or a writer or anything like that, creative blocks just come hand in hand. I've had 500 of them so far. I find that I take a break. Like taking a break has started to work for me. Before, I used to really beat myself up about it, but genuinely, I think taking a break and focusing on another creative passion really helps. So I love to draw, and I love to read, and I love to indulge in just shows on Netflix and Korean dramas and everything else. So all of these things just feed my work in the background. I go to museums because that's one of my favorite things to do. I just love to look at other people's art, longing for the day that my work will be there. But these things really spark ideas. And what really, really helps is having a book. So have a sketchbook or a journal. So I have a book, I'll just pull it out over here. I have a book that I just put like just a bunch of ideas in. Just anytime I just put loads of ideas in here. And whenever I do have a creative block, or if I'm ever struggling with creating something, I go through it. And I realized that past Bella actually sorts present Bella out a lot of the time. So just set yourself up for the times that you will have a creative block. Like, we're all gonna have them. So whatever you can do now to just record anything that you find inspiring, when the block hits, you have something that you can check out, and it'll connect you to your past self, and ideas will just flow right in. And it's the same with using things like Pinterest or Instagram, where you're saving stuff and having them in a folder. I find going through that really helps me. And another thing that I do is I have my bookshelf. So I collect loads of books. And like, for example, I was actually just going through this book of knowledge full of really interesting things I just love to read, and then think, oh, well, if this could be a photo, what would it look like? At the moment, I'm like obsessed with like the Greek stuff. So I've got all of that. Just set yourself up by recording as much as you can what inspires you now. And then later, whenever you do have a block, you can always come and check back and connect yourself to your inspired state. Okay, so how do people find your photos for print or magazine? So when it comes to print, people just DM me. So I get emails and DM requests for print, and I just handle them that way. I actually do the same to other artists as well. Like if there's ever another artist that I really admire, I just reach out to them and just say, hey, do you do prints? Because more often than not, a lot of artists possibly can be like myself and not have set up a shop, but they are very open to just sorting it out via an email. And then when it comes to magazines, I actually reach out to magazines. So a lot of people think that opportunities happen just because they are presented to you, but actually I actively pursue many of my opportunities. So I will reach out to magazines, and I will reach out to anybody that I want to work with. And while 90% of the time, and I'm not lying, like honestly, 90% of the time, it doesn't work out. But that's fine, because 10% sort of, it does. So it's never a waste of time, because whatever does work out was meant to work out. And so I really believe like the more effort you put into creating opportunities for yourself, then more opportunities, like the percentage of it, like that 10% just gets bigger, right? So yeah, just I actively pursue publications. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, there's one more question from Lucy, and I'm just gonna answer that before I jump into Photoshop really quickly. Lucy asks, how did you gain confidence in posing and communicating with your models? Honestly, I think it's just practice. So when I first started working with models, I didn't really know what I was looking for, and I didn't really know how to communicate what I was looking for, because if I don't know what I'm looking for, how can I ask somebody for it? So the more I practiced and the more I shot and the more I retouched my own images, I started to realize that there was just things that I was beginning to notice. Like I started to notice that I liked it when I could see the neck, like this part of the neck. So then when I'm directing my models, I'm like, oh, can you tilt your head this way or that way? So I saw the neck. And then I liked I noticed that I like it when, there's more triangles in the body, like breaking the body up a bit and like moving the shoulders back and forth just to see what happens. So then I started directing the model to do that. So that's how I built up my confidence, by just practicing and really looking at what I gravitate to in my selects. And then once I start noticing that, it then helped me for the next photo shoot. And honestly, you just get better the more you do it. So I would say that if you're somebody who is nervous about communicating on a shoot, don't put any pressure on yourself. Just take it slow and just communicate to the model that you want to try something and if they're open to it. And most of the time the model will genuinely work with you because she's worked with many other photographers and everybody has different styles. So just you build up your own confidence that way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because we're going to dive into a Photoshop file that I'm going to show you. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly look at this. Okay, wonderful. I'm so pleased that you're enjoying this. Thank you. Right, we are going to share the screen. Yeah. And I'm going to say, how do I do this? There we go. Okay, so I think you can see my screen now. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and, go through this file. Now, while I'm here, I don't think I can see your comments. So let me see if I can figure this out so I can keep up with you as we go. Give me 1 moment. Okay, so you're going to see your comments too. There. Okay, so I'm just going to move that there and there. All right. Okay, so here we go. So this is the image. Let me know if you can all see it. So yeah, if you can just leave a comment on there, that'd be really great if you can see the screen. And I'm just gonna go ahead and turn everything off. Wonderful, thank you. Oh, you guys are great. Okay, awesome. Okay, so the first thing, so this is my file. Now, I told you guys before that actually shared it in the comments, but for those of you who missed it, I process all of my images in Capture One. So whenever I shoot either on my Canon camera or on my Phase One system, I process everything on Capture One. And the reason for that is just because I love the way the program processes the files. So if you're somebody who hasn't tried it yet, then just go ahead and download the trial and open up an image in Capture One and open up a raw image in Lightroom. And then you can make your own mind. But by doing that, I immediately pick Capture One. And so once I process my image in Capture One, I will change the exposure, bring the contrast down a little bit, and I will bring down the highlights and bring up the shadows and just set up a good base for color toning. I will then bring the file over to Photoshop. The first thing I do is I liquefy. Now, whenever I liquefy, I love liquefying with clothes and fabrics because I love to just make everything really full and flowy, as you can see over here. Another thing I did was I just elongated her neck a little bit more, so it felt like it was really stretched out into the pose. And that's the step one. Step two was cleaning. So the next thing I do is I start cleaning my pictures, and as you can see already over here, there were all of these little wire bits from how we put the flowers on, which you can't see from the front, but for this angle to work, well, I just had to do some cleaning. The next step was I really did not like this little bit at the end, this bit on the umbrella. So I think I was trying to fix it and make it work, and I was like, oh, let's just see if it works. Eventually, you're going to see what I did next, was just get rid of it, but it did not work. So we're going to leave that. I'm going to open up the next folder. As you can see, I keep all my folders very tidy so that I know exactly where I am. I am going to do this first. So the next step I did was I cut out my subject. So I'm going to show you the mask. And so this is the mask where I cut out my subject from the backdrop. And to do that, oh, if I turn this on again, sorry. I'm going to put the backdrop there. Okay. So to do that, I actually went to something over here. If I just turn this, disable the mask. There we go. If I go over here, I'll show you what I use. I used color range. So I went to color range and I selected the colors like this. This is why I recommend using a different color backdrop to the backdrop, to the colors on the subject. There we go. So I actually use color range to select my mask. And I'm definitely going to be making a video on this for my education platform because selecting the subject for my background, I've become a pro at it over the past year. But for the purpose of this quick workshop, I'm just showing you the steps that I took. I can't really jump into detail, unfortunately, so I'm sorry about that. But this is what I use. I use color range to separate my subject from the backdrop. And so eventually, when I did it, it looked like that. Okay, so then I put my, impose my backdrop, which is this one. So this is the backdrop that I worked up and modified and used some textures on it to really get that really golden, old, vintage feel. And I stuck that behind my subject. There's a big difference right now between the backdrop and the subject. The backdrop's so dark and the subject's really bright, but I started to go ahead and fix that as we go. So this is me sort of beginning to fix that using a curves adjustment layer and layer mask to just bring it up. And then after that, I felt like these were way too, they were not very magical. These flower things, I just sort of started to delete them and fix them and figure it out and just, yeah, go with it. Go with it. Nothing has to be perfect. It just has to be, you know, it just has to look like it works. So the next step is dodging and burning. Now, when it comes to dodging and burning, I use curves. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this down a little bit so I can show you what that looks like. And I'm really sorry if this is really fast. So if you have any questions, please do leave them in the chat because I will go ahead and answer everything at the end. If you watched any of Pratik's retouching videos, he also uses curves to do his dodging and burning. And I was really happy when I learned that he did that too, because it felt like it validated me. I was like, oh yes, I'm not doing something wrong. But by using curves, it's a very non-destructive way of dodging and burning. This way, and I use the curves along with a layer mask, and I'll show you what the layer mask looks like. This way, anything that I ever do in my layer mask, if I ever go too far, I can bring it back. If I don't go far enough, I can add some more. It is a really great, versatile way of dodging and burning. I have the helper layers up here. So I convert the image to, I use the helper layer to remove the distraction of color so that I can focus primarily on light and shadow. So when it comes to dodging and burning, because Pratik is somebody who's my fine tuner, he actually tells me not to go too in detail with the dodging and burning because that's where he will take over. So I do a global dodge and burn, and Pratik's files are a lot more intense. So I just do like a global dodge and burn. After that, it's my favorite process, which is color turning. Now, I use every, well, I wouldn't say every, but it feels like I use every color adjustment that Photoshop has to offer. And I certainly know every color adjustment that Photoshop has to offer. So all the color adjustments that I use are over here in this, the bottom of the layers panel in this little icon. And this panel has everything that you could ever need to create some really beautiful colors. Selective color, gradient map, color lookup, black and white, color balance, all of these. It's just wonderful. If you want to know more about what each of these do, then please do check out my color course. I actually have a full color course educational video on my Color Lab website that I would just recommend anybody who ever wants to know anything about color tuning goes and checks out, because I go into all of these and then I show you how to apply them to your pictures. So to show you what I've done, I desaturated the image. Yes, so Malik, I'm just going to post a link here. It's literally this, colorlab.com. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so I desaturate the image, and the reason why I always desaturate first is because I find that if I do not desaturate, I go from 0 to 100% color intensity very quickly. So I desaturate to give myself some leeway. And I also do this whenever I've color toned something and I feel like I've gone too far. I will just hit the black and white layer again and just desaturate it. So I've set this to you at 20%. And then I went ahead and separated my subject from the background a little bit more by setting it to multiply at 20%. So it's the same adjustment. I've just duplicated it, and I've added the mask. So my background is dark, and the subject is the same. So if I turn this off and on, you can see that. Okay. This is a really great trick, by the way, if you're ever shooting on location, to make the subject brighter than the background, and then people will think you've used lights, but you haven't, you just used natural light. Then I use a color balance, and although the blacks are really crushing here, don't worry, everything does come back in the end. So I just trust the process. This is color balance. So in color balance, what I was really focusing on, I used everything, midtones, shadows, highlights. You can see they're all been adjusted. For color balance, what I was really focusing on was just sort of reducing some of the red and slipping in a more darker, like a blue in the shadows, which is what I always find myself drawn to. I use one of my actions, so flickering firelight from I think it's the Nirvana color collection. So that has some color adjustments already set up. And I always like to bring in some of my actions because I feel like I can get a real sense of color direction very quickly. So flickering firelight really helped me get that sort of warm tone on the backdrop and the subject in a really beautiful way with just one click. After that, I use selective color again to really add some more yellows and really shift the red of the dress to a more coral or orangey place. Like I feel like I introduced some oranges and yellows with the selective color. And in that, I used shifted things in the reds, I believe, or yellows. Yeah, reds. So I used levels to bring back some of the information, bring back some brightness to my subject. And I used some textures. So this is just a texture. If I make this 100%, right now it's on soft light at 30%. If I make this 100%, then this is the texture I used. It's just a texture that I picked up from unsplash.com. And I think it's just like tea-stained paper, like just tea-stained paper. But when you play with the blending modes and you play with the opacities, you can get some really interesting effects. So as you can see already, it started to just sort of give my image a little bit more warmth and some, like, I don't know, I would say like some grittiness to it, which I really liked. I then used Channel Mixer to really get a lovely, interesting shade on the highlights in particular. Lucy, it's from Unsplash. There we go. There you go. And I'm just going to turn that off and on. So Channel Mixer is really fun to play with. I then use a color lookup to sort of smash into the shadows and start getting that faded effect. So this particular color lookup is called Sienna Blue, and that really gave a lovely sort of faded effect, as you can see. Like a more, I was starting to really see the painterly direction really come together at this point. And so I just added another color lookup at 10% this time. And when it comes to these adjustments, as you can tell already, if you look at the opacities, they're not at 100%. I'm playing with like 15%, 20%, 10%. And the more you work with the different opacities and color adjustments in general, you will really start to notice a difference between 10% and 11% and like 10% and 12%. And actually, if you ever become to that stage, then I feel sorry for you, because it's really hard to make a decision. I really struggle. Sometimes I like 3% and sometimes I like 5%. It's a frustrating place to be in. But I will get sharper. That's the point I'm trying to make. So after that, I just played with some levels, and I used levels to add a bit of contrast on my subject. And then I realized that I felt like the image was a bit too, it needed to be more yellow to get that sort of real painterly look that I wanted. So I actually used a, what's this called? Over here. Solid color layer. So I use a solid color at, just like color picked this sort of lovely yellow tan color, and I set that to overlay at 5%. So it's very, very slight difference, but you can, I don't know if you can see it, but I can certainly see it. And then I use levels again to bring back some of the detail and just lift up the darkness of that image. Because sometimes when I color tone, I forget. Yeah, you can't tell. What really helps is when you walk away from the computer and come back, and then you can use the adjustments. And I think I did it again. I just duplicated the levels again, and we're at 70% at this time.
Hi, Bella.
After that, oh, hi, Rick. Oh, we've hit the timeline. Okay,
You know, Bella,
if
we could just get you to move over here, I think we could do maybe a 2 or 3 day workshop with you. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Sorry to jump in. We want to keep ourselves on time for everybody's concern. We do have the photo contest that you had judged. And
yes.
I want to let you folks know, after we make the announcements for the winner that you chose, you can take another 15 minutes and we'll allow the questions to go on. But we have to prepare for the next workshop as well.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Let's just see if this is the image that you had chose, if you would like just to talk about it. Sean Thomas.
Yes.
Congratulations, Sean. Go ahead.
Okay, so the reason why I picked this photo is because I felt like this was like 2020.
Yeah.
I honestly really connected with it. Congratulations, Sean Thomas, so much. I really love the symmetry, the calmness of one side and the chaos of the other side, and this like tiny figure in the middle with, I'm assuming, is a surfboard. Like I think I was drawn to the story of it, and I felt like it was an image that a lot of people could project a lot of ideas of what they like, expectations on that image.
Yeah.
I felt like it allows people to project their own story to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks to Capture One, Sean, you get the Capture One Pro 20, which is an amazing program. Pretty much most of our speakers have been using it, and Bella certainly and Patik have it. You'll enjoy it when you get it. Thank you to Capture One, and thank you for Megapixels and Phase One for looking after us and bringing us Bella. This has been a fascinating talk. And Bella, we in Hawaii, we love to see people like yourself who've got your own inspiration. Your 20-80 rule of having 20% clients and 80% you is fabulous. I think that's anybody who's in the creative world knows how difficult that is to do. And so congratulations on that. Thanks again. We're going to keep this open for a little bit longer. And I thank you, Bella, and we'll see you in Hawaii next time.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Rick, so much.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Okay, so I will be able to stay in this room for another 15-20 minutes. Do you guys want me to finish showing you what I did like in the photo? I think we only had like 3 more layers left. Okay, so let me just go ahead and just quickly share the screen. And let me see, share. I guess it'll take 1 moment. Okay, great. Yeah, it will literally take like 2 more minutes because it's just, I think, 3 more layers. Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So that was where we got to. The next group over here that I'm just going to quickly show you, I'm just going to turn those two on. I use the selective tool and the selective color layer and the hue saturation, and both of those just subdued this blue, as you can see over here. It's like a small detail, but it was one that I felt like when I was zoomed out, my eye kept getting drawn to that blue, and that's not where I want my viewer's eye to go either, so I just subdued it. And so this is something that I'm also very conscious about. I'm very conscious about where the viewer's eye goes to on the image and everything, and I prioritize what's important. And for me, this is important, like the moment happening up here, and then everything feeds that moment. And then after that, I just sort of used levels again to contrast, and I played around with levels a little bit more. And then, so this is how far I take, I would say, nearly all my work. Because I work with Pratik, who is, as we all know, a wonderful retoucher, I take my work all the way to this level, and then I send it to Pratik, and he does the final clean. So I make the cake, and I make the icing, and then Pratik gives it the beautiful frosting. Yeah, don't tell him I said that. That was like really bad. But more often than not, I'm actually becoming really good at getting this finished by myself as well. But for this particular image, because I knew it was a really important set, Pratik took over. So I asked him to soothe out Yinzi's chin over here. Unfortunately, it was just the way the lighting was hitting and the angle and her expression at the time. It created some quite deep contrasty lines that didn't really feed it was distracting from the emotion that was happening here. And just a few details like the hair, I felt it was a little bit too distracting. So I gave Pratik the guidelines that I wanted some things removed and just softened out. So we worked on this together, where I just softened out the hair around her ear, around her neck, and he soothed out the concerns I had about her chin. And then apart from that, if I zoom out a little bit more, let's bring that up a bit. There. The wrinkles on her dress was something that we smoothed out together as well later. So that again, it just felt like everything was very soft and flowing and just in tune with the energy and emotion of the shoot. And all I was really doing is just removing any distraction. And that's it. So I'm just going to zoom out, I think, once more. How do I do that? Like that? Nope. That way. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the beginning. So this was our beginning. And this was the end. So it is really amazing. This was plan B. I actually didn't even have this image in mind when we planned this shoot. But I was so happy with the way it turned out. And I really hope that in this little session that you found something of value that you can hopefully add to your own work as well and your own approach. I always find it really inspiring and helpful when I see other people share their processes. So yeah, I hope that this is something that you found interesting as well. All right, I'm so happy. Thank you very much for joining me. And I was just having a quick look to see if there was any questions that I missed. But I don't think there were any actually. Roy asked that it's fairly obvious that color plays a major role in your work. Have you done black and white work? No, Roy. I actually really love color. It's such a thing where even when I do try and do something in black and white, I just fall back on the color because it's my favorite thing in the world. All right, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks that they have today. Acacia asked, are there any schools that you would recommend for anybody who would want to pursue a career in photography? I didn't go to school for photography, so I can't really recommend anything. I'm really sorry. But school of practice, maybe? That's the school I went to. I just practiced a lot. Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the weekend if you have any left, or the week that's coming up. All right, have a